This is a Momentum Media production.
Welcome to the Smart Property Investment Show, the podcast by investors for investors.
Hello, welcome to a brand new episode of the Smart Property Investment Show. I'm your host, Juliet Helmke, part of the team that brings you all your favorite stories over on smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. Now, our listeners and readers know that we cover what's happening in the property market and topics related to housing and real estate across the country. It's important to us and we know it's important to you. But it can't be denied that sometimes those major capital cities capture the most attention of modern media. Today, I am joined by a very special guest who's going to be speaking to us about life outside the capitals, the challenges, opportunities, and stories that maybe don't get the most airtime but are absolutely essential to the country's housing puzzle. So I'm very pleased to welcome Liz Ritchie, CEO of the Regional Australia Institute, to the show. Liz, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
Liz, now obviously your work at the Regional Australia Institute, or RAI as I know you guys go by the short version, cover a wide range of issues impacting livability in Australia's rural and regional areas. We know it's not all housing, it's jobs, it's infrastructure, it's access to services like healthcare, education, and so much more. But in many ways, housing is an integral part of all of these facets. So could you talk to us a little bit about what you see happening in regions when supply becomes tight in communities, such as it is across many Australian towns, although acknowledging the regions are vast and varied and that what is happening in one place is not necessarily happening in a different place. There are different stories across all of them.
Yeah, really happy to. Well, thank you for the opportunity to join you and share the work of the Regional Australia Institute. Your introduction really summed up, beautifully the vast array of topics that we do work on at the Institute. And indeed, important for your listeners to know that we're the only think tank dedicated to rural and regional Australia. I probably just want to start with saying, we are a purpose-driven organisation and we exist to empower regions to thrive. So, understanding that all the research that we do, all the activation of that research is ultimately about giving knowledge and power back to those that live in regional communities so that we can ensure a better and brighter future right across the country. I guess we reached a bit of a tipping point when we had our 10th anniversary a couple of years ago. And we wanted to take a moment in time to reflect on 10 years of research to say, well, where has this taken us to date? And that provided us the space and opportunity to say we need a North Star that brings together all of the pieces of work that we know will help our regions thrive into the future and will provide the right settings for empowerment. So we actually created what's called the Regionalisation Ambition, which is a 10-year plan to rebalance the nation. And within that, after 18 months of consultation, we landed on 5 key pillars: population, jobs and skills, livability, innovation and productivity, and sustainability and resilience. Under and wrapped around those 5 pillars are 20 targets. Now, each year, we will provide a progress report which says, how are we tracking? And I guess why this is important is undoubtedly we have a target on housing. And one of the biggest issues that we see in the current settings in this country is our vacancy rate in rural and regional communities. And so this really speaks to the heart of your question about supply. But what I want to say before I get into talking about, the issues around supply is that the importance of this ambition cannot be understated, because we cannot solve the issues that surround housing if we are not giving great consideration to the other 4 pillars that fit within our ambition. And when I say that, let me break it down. We cannot provide more houses, build more houses, even plan for more houses, unless we have the people power to do that. So we need more population. We need more people living in our regions. We're already seeing a supercharged movement, and we'll get to that. But we need more. We need dedicated, targeted skills that's going to bring our planners, our builders, our engineers, our designers, our earthworking, construction. We need the whole gamut. And so the sort of sophistication of the regionalisation ambition is really taken us to a place where we speak at length with government agencies, ministers in every, federal, state, parliaments to help them understand that actually we have a systems problem here and we have to deal with all of these issues simultaneously if we have any chance of solving one of them. And so that would bring me to housing. In relation to the supply, unfortunately, what we've seen is a vacancy rate which has hovered either around 1% or below 1% in regional communities for the last 2 to 3 years. It's having a profound impact on our regional communities. And the way that I would couch it is, we describe it as growing pains, because what COVID did was unexpectedly supercharge our population movement to the regions for a whole range of reasons. And it's typical of the old saying, never waste a crisis. Whilst, we know that the global pandemic caused so much pain, so much loss of life, but no one could ever have seen that coming. No one had a crystal ball. No one had the opportunity to get in front of that. So you have to kind of consider what can you control, what can't you control. And I guess where we are now is that, 3 years down the track, we are seeing that trend to the regions is staying. But unfortunately, our housing and planning approvals for housing has not kept pace with population growth. And I would also add to that even prior to COVID, it was not keeping pace with population growth. So it's not that the issue is new, it's just that it's been compounded by the supercharged movement that we've had that you planned for. But what I would say about that is that we know now what we know. And so we have this, opportunity to try to get in front of it. You could say before COVID that we weren't looking deeply at that sleeping giant. We really weren't considering what is happening with population and how is that impacting our housing markets. But we have the benefit of hindsight now, and this is why we created the Regional Movers Index.
I was just about to ask about that, because it's not just the anecdotal evidence that we all sort of know from hearing of people who've decided they're going to, move out of some of these major cities, Sydney, Melbourne, for the livability that regions offer. Although I think we all know somebody or are those people ourselves who have sought a lifestyle that, that is in many ways more in line with what you might be searching for at that point in time. But you actually have raw data around this. So Regional Australia Institute, as you said, you publish the Regional Movers Index, and I'd love for you to just give us a bit of an overview of what you've actually seen over the past couple years up to most recently, and what the latest index showed, which came out, about a month or two ago now for that quarter.
Yeah, really happy to share. I mean, the Regional Movers Index, we are just so proud of this partnership. It is a partnership we have with the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, where we analyse their over 10 million clients that they have across the country and their mobility patterns into rural and regional communities. So the size of the index is really important. One of the things I'd say is that the other reason that we wanted to create the RMI is that other public information is often too slow. So we were searching for an avenue to build an index that would provide more timely information than a 5-year census and the, annualised estimated population figures out of the ABS. And so we wanted to make sure we could be upfront and quarterly, so being able to release this report quarterly, we can then provide decision makers, policy makers, building communities, local governments, etc., all of our audiences with data that should help them make better decisions about their own investments and what's coming down the pipeline. Because if you're starting to see some major changes, major demographic changes, spikes in hotspots that we see coming through, this is really important information and, ensuring that it's not 2 to 3 years old.
That lack of lag in information is so integral. And it was something that struck me with the latest one, which I know you'll share with us, that just showed that this is, in many ways, the opinion had sort of been, oh, that was a big pandemic spike and now it's changing. But that's not what you've really found in the most recent index. Isn't that correct?
That's absolutely true. I felt like a broken record both throughout COVID and even towards the end when I would be questioned, almost daily, if not weekly, about, will this fade away? Will the regional movers return to the cities? And we were adamant, and still are today, that this is not a blip in the radar. This has tapped into a latent desire that Australians, in particular city dwellers, have had to return to live where they love and to work from a place, that they see as their home. That there's so many reasons why city dwellers are moving. They're looking for more time, more space, more amenity to natural environment. But the issues that are really ever present today in our lives around cost of living, and indeed probably one most pertinent today is housing affordability. So carrying those really enormous debt burdens that they were carrying in capital cities, selling up and taking the opportunity to move to regional Australia, is what we've seen, and that trend's not going anywhere. So the latest research that's come through our index has shown us that we've hit a 12-month high and we're 20% above pre-pandemic movement to the regions. And so whilst across the last few years, you definitely have peaks and troughs. There's seasonal movement in each quarter. What we saw was, really encouraging from our perspective because we need more people. We've got a target to see 11 million people living in rural and regional Australia by 2032. And our numbers tell us that we are more than on track to meet that target. And so, it's both encouraging that I guess our crystal ball forecasting is coming true, but what's discouraging is that it's going to take a whole lot more work and dedicated focus of investment, policy coordination and execution on both to actually enable us to rebalance the nation, to ensure that the population movement that we're seeing in these various parts of the country is not driving livability down. The reason that these people have chosen these places to move to is because they love them for one reason or another, or there's work opportunities, employment opportunities. And so livability factors around, what are the health services? What are the childcare services? What are the education provisions in that community that will be available to me? What is my transport connectivity like? Indeed, what are my roads like? These are decisions that people are thinking about when they're thinking about making the move. They're all interrelated.
It's so true. And Liz, as you said, there are so many factors that affect that livability, that draw people to the regions, that turn them into prospective buyers or renters in those areas. And it's something we're going to jump back into after a short break. We'll be back on the other side with Liz Ritchie from the Regional Australia Institute. Welcome back, everyone. We're talking to Liz Ritchie, CEO of the Regional Australia Institute, delving into housing in Australia's regions, including the challenges and opportunities that exist across this country's varied communities. Now, before the break, Liz, we were talking about your Regional Movers Index and some of the many, many reasons that people are being drawn to living in rural and regional Australian communities. Now, as we know from that research that you do, that you partner with the Commonwealth Bank on, a lot of this was sort of the spikes that we've seen recently was kicked off around the pandemic and some things that happened during that time. Now, of course, there were many factors, but one of those was the rise in remote working ability for a lot of Australia's workers. And it's been a topic of conversation pretty much since then. Will this continue? Will people come back into the office? It's not something that we haven't been talking about. But more recently, it was in the news when we heard New South Wales Premier Chris Minns issue a memo that's been variously called directive, a request, but asking the public servants in New South Wales to move more into office-based work, to consider that they should be doing their jobs from an office and less from home. So started to have, again, more of a conversation about the challenges of remote work as well as the benefits. And one of those big benefits is the fact that by allowing people even to work part-time from their home, they have a little more flexibility in terms of where they live. So I'd love to hear from your perspective how you see the continuation of remote and flexible work playing into the strengthening of Australia's regional and rural communities.
Thank you. It's such a topic that's close to my heart. I mean, this news was really unfortunate to read from my personal perspective. I feel that the opportunities that have arisen from mobilising a work from home culture are changing the very nature of our nation as we know it. And what I mean by that is opening up so many opportunities for people to, move to where they love, move closer to their family where they may have grown up, or just choose a different lifestyle, one that offers them, a selection of activities or locations where they get to participate in a community in ways that they couldn't once. But maybe it's their hobbies that they're closer to in regional Australia. I think that, we really need to dig into this, and I will be personally reaching out to Premier Minns in New South Wales, because what we see here is that working from home is an inclusive policy. Inclusive in that, as you've said, it opens up flexibility for working parents. In years gone by, those statements would have been more directed for women, but today it is very much about working parents and having the flexibility to juggle a meaningful career and also support their family and all of the many demands that we have in our lives today in modern life. Modern life moves at such a fast pace. But aside from that, when people who have a desire and aspiration to participate and live in any regional community, they come with their skills, their knowledge, their energy, their effort. They come with their salary. And so they start to participate in regional communities in ways that simply wouldn't be available to them in a metropolitan area. This is what we know. We know they're moving for more time and more space, but they're moving for more connection. They want to be part of a community. They want to, volunteer on the weekend and be part of those local sporting groups. We've seen the demise of sport in Australia, and it's because of the way we work, the way we live. We've seen the demise of volunteerism for exactly the same reasons, with people working the hours, the modern life, stress and pressure. Local community groups are crying out for volunteers. So what the supercharged population has done to regional Australia has really opened up this whole new landscape. It's been a major societal shift that we've been, tracking closely and that we absolutely support. I mean, my organisation has a policy that says, we are looking for the most talented people to work in our organisation who believe in our purpose, who believe in what we believe in, who believe in a brighter regional economy and life in Australia. And we cannot, rely on our capital cities to be the domain of our employment market. Until we truly unlock a national employment market, we will never have the best talented people doing the work we need them doing. You need to align a person's purpose and reason for being with their work. Now, there are sectors where that's not possible. There are jobs such as, we call them high-touch jobs, nursing, building, care, childcare. These jobs require their staff to be present, and these are incredibly important. What we've also seen is a couple of years ago, we launched the Regional Australia Council, and originally we had a founding 10-member table, and that's now extended to 15 and beyond. But these are corporations such as Telstra, KPMG, Bendigo and Adelaide Bank, the list goes on. But one of the, sort of joining values was about promoting, work agnostic locations, and that remote and flexible work is here to stay, and we need to support that. There are many organisations, large organisations, publicly calling for the return to the office, and we know that in an environment where talent is tight, that they're losing talent. Yeah. And then what we're seeing is policies that reprimand those decisions, that lock them out from higher bonuses. I mean, these are worrying signs. I think we really need to have a much bigger national conversation about what remote work means in an economic perspective for our nation, but more than that, from a societal perspective. How do we actually think about the cost of mental health, the cost of congestion, the cost of pollution, the cost of living the busyness of metropolitan life, and what that does to a person. People are making their choices about moving because they're looking for a healthier lifestyle. And we have to listen to that. We have to be attuned to that. So it's a big topic, and I think there's going to be a whole lot more to come on this.
I agree. And we will be covering all of that because, as we've said, remote work, it influences where people want to live, how they want to live their lives. And that obviously it all comes down and impacts housing. It impacts the homes that they are living in, what is being built, who we are creating these new homes for in a moment in time when we are trying to rapidly build homes across the country. So we will be covering that conversation too, Liz, and thank you so much for your insight there. Time for another quick break. We'll be back shortly with Liz Ritchie. Welcome back to this episode. Now, before the break, we were talking about the many reasons that people are being drawn to the regions. And we were talking about remote work and how that really plays into the ability for people to choose where they live, and how that has, in some ways, it's not the only factor, but has been one factor that has really drawn people to the regions since that became something that was more available to a lot of Australian workers. Now, Liz, earlier in this year, around February, you and the Regional Australia Institute, with some other organizations related to building and property in the nation, came together to talk about some of these, the confluence of these things at the National Regional Housing Summit. I was lucky enough to be there and take part and listen to so many of the great conversations. And it's been a couple months on from that. So I'd love to hear, from your perspective, how you felt that gathering went. It was a day-long event. It had so many people from so many different places in Australia in the room sharing ideas about what's working in their communities and what they're trying to work on. So what have you heard following that event? Some of the takeaways and some of the progress that has been made?
Thank you. Yeah, we were really thrilled with how the inaugural, as we call it, the National Regional Housing Summit went. As you said, we had over 300 people from right across the country join us, and they were, involved in the housing sector in a variety of ways, everything from local government to community housing organisations to government agencies, builders, investors. It was, and even I think mums and dads, just interested concerned about the future of regional housing. We knew that we needed to create this opportunity to almost enhance what is already a burning platform. So in speaking to the government of the day, on the one hand, we want to commend the work that's being done The federal government have really stepped into the housing policy issues in ways that we probably haven't seen in recent years. It's really, historically been much more of a state domain. So we have always commended that. But I guess from a regional perspective, the challenge that we see with the federal policy settings are that they continue to be a one-size-fits-all. And what I mean by that is that the funding itself, while, it's extensive, it doesn't target regional communities. It doesn't get granular enough so that regional towns and municipalities have the opportunity to go, that is funding for me. And I'll give an example in that the HAF Fund, which is Housing Australia Future Fund, it was designed to ensure that we have social and affordable housing, but it's a competitive tender process. And by the very nature of creating a competitive tender process, the community housing sector have to compete against one another. Now, when you start to think about the size and gravitas of the different organisations in that sector, of course the capital cities are going to have far more resources and organisations that are in that domain or in that sector. And then you've only got a sprinkling of community housing organisations in rural and regional Australia. So by the very nature of its design, we are limiting the opportunities for regional Australia to participate in that block of funding. And that's just a kind of example that highlights, unless you allocate, I always say, at least 40% of any funding block to rural and regional communities, the money will never make it to the regions. It will never get to their hands, to those who need it most. And herein lies the challenge. So coming out of the Housing Summit, we talked a lot about that. And one of the encouraging things that did come out of it in the latest budget was a further larger funding for infrastructure, supporting infrastructure in rural and regional communities, a large fund that will help, which was directly targeted towards local governments to help them plan and build the headworks that are required for further housing to be realised in their communities. So, we really welcomed that announcement in the federal budget, but we are still not seeing enough pulling apart and refocusing some of the policy design to be more targeted to regional communities. It is ongoing work. I guess the other piece that I would say that's encouraging is, as I started earlier in this conversation about the importance of ambition and jobs and skills as a pillar that underpins a successful housing market, we're seeing much more investment in preparing for traineeships and apprenticeships in the construction sector, really starting to mobilise there and recognising that we need those skills. And they need to be, learning and participating in this training pathways in their community so they're more likely to stay. The other pieces that we continue to promote, we're calling for more people to move to regional Australia, and we've directly made calls to tradies themselves to say, make a name for yourself in regional Australia because the opportunities are vast. If you're sitting in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, any capital city, and you're a plumber, electrician, builder, carpenter, we need you. We want you. And you've got an opportunity to make a name for yourself and have a beautiful lifestyle at the same time. So those campaigns that we run, movetomore.com.au, it's still live and well, and we need more investment there. But that was the first of the Housing Summit, and you'll see more next year.
Oh, that's exciting. I look forward to coming along again and taking part in all of those conversations. I got so much out of it last time, and we know our readers did too because they responded very well to the coverage. So, Liz, I know that you're never very quiet there over at the Regional Australia Institute, and in fact, you are right ahead of another very important event coming up next week. This is your sort of annual event, the National Regions Rising Summit, which you're in in, I'm sure, a very busy mode preparing for. This will, of course, touch on housing, but all of the many, many other things that we chatted about today and the many things that are under your purview. Sort of now that we've reflected on some of the things that came out of the Regional Housing Summit, I'd really love to hear about your aims going into the next National Regions Rising Summit and what it entails and what you're hoping to get out of that.
Thanks, Juliet. We are so excited about welcoming almost 400 stakeholders and friends and partners from right around the country. Each state and jurisdiction are joining us next week for a massive 2.5 days here in Canberra. And look, the theme of this year, following on from 2 years of looking at our regionalisation ambition and really bringing that to life, we wanted to use this year as a call to action to understand what the current transition means in this nation. And what I mean by that is not just the net zero transition. I'm talking about the societal transition that we've touched on in this conversation today. So the theme of this year's conference is the new frontier. And, you know, we had such a beautiful creative process of actually coming up with that because you know, if you are looking at net zero, you're looking at the opportunities that are coming to the regions, whether that means co-investment in renewable energy projects, the potential for enhanced and localised regional manufacturing, the employment opportunities that come with that. There's a whole host of investment coming down the line and it's making its way to rural and regional Australia. Australia's success in the energy transition and meeting our targets will lie on the shoulders of regional communities. And so what we're really looking to discuss at this summit is how do we ensure that regional community and people who live in the regions are at the centre of this transition and that it's a just transition. And so, you know, in light of the challenges, the livability challenges that have come about because of the growing pains, the population movement and the ongoing population movement we'll see that will support the transition, we're really calling to governments and the private sector and the regional communities to say, how can you better coordinate and collaborate so that social dividends will be realised? We want to see more housing. We want to see more childcare centres. We want to see a new cancer wing in the local hospital. We want to see more GPs. We want to see more education facilities and training facilities, community services. We don't want logos on footy jumpers anymore. We want to ensure that the private sector will work with regional communities in what we call an active partnership. It's not enough to come in and tell them that you're coming. That is not engagement. So we have this, you know, moment in time. We're really standing at this exciting precipice of change. We can continue to deny and step towards the sort of disunity that we've seen in some quarters, or we can actually step up and take advantage of what we see on the horizon and ensure that regional communities are better off from the transition. It's a really unique moment in time and we do not want to waste or squander this opportunity. So that is what we will be focusing on at the summit.
That's great. And that is, as I believe, the 14th and 15th of August, right? So to date this conversation, we're talking a week out, and we will be really interested to see what comes out of that, Liz, and to continue engaging with you on, particularly for our audience, the issues of housing and property, but all of the various factors that flow into this, as you've so wonderfully explained through this conversation. That is about all we have time for on this episode. So thank you so much for joining us. It's been really great to chat with you and sort of get into the nitty-gritty of the complexity of how much in the regions and in rural Australia, these facets of livability, of housing, jobs are so intimately connected. So thank you so much for joining us. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I'm sure our listeners have too.
Thank you, Juliet. And you've just closed it beautifully there with highlighting the complexity. These are big, wicked challenges and we all need to work together to solve them. So thank you. It's great to be with you.
Absolutely. Listeners, I'm sure you loved this episode, so be sure to like us or review us on whatever platform you do listen to podcasts on. Stay up to date with all the latest news over at smartpropertyinvestment.com.au and follow us on our socials, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, to name a few. If you have any questions or want to put forward someone who you think would make a great guest on a future episode of the Smart Property Investment Show, send us an email, editor@smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. Until next time, stay well.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.
Feeling trapped by rising interest payments? Escape from mortgage prison with expert refinancing assistance from Finny. We have helped hundreds of borrowers break free from higher loan repayments by finding a more suitable loan. Our expert team can quickly assess your situation, and if there's a better lender available, we'll find it fast. Don't delay. Call today. Speak to a Finny mortgage specialist on 02 8866 2444 or visit our website at www.finny.com.au.